Hey Venkat, thanks a lot for taking out the time to join this podcast. I really didn't think that it will turn out to be a podcast. Actually, I was thinking it to be more like a casual conversation. So it's because I had gone through your LinkedIn very recently, and I saw that you had a big career change from computer science, and then you moved into politics and law. So I wanted to know, like how all of this panned out for you. How you started from computer science background and then moved into something which is so different that it can be considered kind of like a taboo in India especially. So I wanted to
Right.
know yeah, all about this.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you for inviting. I think it's my pleasure joining you for the podcast. Plus, I find it when I speak to folks like you, particularly
Hmm.
20 odd folks. In some sense, every decade, the country goes through certain changes in terms of its attitudes, in terms of the first tier city and second tier city interactions and things like that. What I see over here is the enormous confidence that comes because there's a large amount of momentum that gets created in this. It's going to
Right.
because for after a really long time, maybe there's a large amount of exposure that could reach to large sections of young folks. So they kind of mature far more faster. They kind of get exposed to the best practices far more faster. And it also become extremely curious far more faster. And it's all the sign of a very healthy society in some sense, or rather, all great innovation societies had these elements in place. And I
Hmm.
really feel that that's happening to this part of the region, the South Asian part of the region as well, in some sense. So I'm happy to have joined the podcast. Happy
Yeah,
to interact with you.
thanks a lot. uh, yeah, so again, like there won't be many questions as such because I'm still getting to know about you. So we'll make this super fun, more of like just a conversation, casual conversation. So yeah, why don't we start with like getting to know more about you.
Absolutely. So my name is Venkat. I grew up in Coimbatore. It's a western city I mean, not rather, it's a city in the western part of Tamil Nadu. My parents, like the great migration of 70s and 80s, where people are moving from farmlands into industrialized locations. I think they moved, and I think I grew up in the downtown Coimbatore until 18. Then, like all kids in that particular period of time, before someone can think when what their interests are, they would ask you to do engineering or medicine. I know this is a very cliched statement for most Indian kid experiences, but unfortunately, I think I was part of the same. Rotan, I was really interested in probably having a sports career at some point. Indeed, Billy dallied with volleyball. I did play for the state team of Tamil Nadu under 15. But then I was
Nice.
also decent with math skill sets. So I think at some point in time they said, okay, you know what, you should also like I wouldn't say a rat race, but I think in parents' perspective, it's more of a good life, or rather a route to a good life, where they
Right.
would want to say, okay, I mean, like just go ahead and start preparing for these civil services or sports. All these things are okay, but abhi to I mean, like tumko career wahan nahi hai. So kind of it shifted, and then those 2 3 years of mixed experiences in terms of me being far more practical in terms of why something is working into, I wouldn't say rote learning, but then a more competitive exam focused learning, which I really hated. I mean, like because I need whys to motivate myself into doing certain things, and oftentimes you don't get right. And like majority of Indian kids, not that they are not smart, it's just that the ecosystem is such that you wouldn't be able to do that. So um, I was that kid, and I went into Velo Institute of Technology to do my bachelor's, and naturally computer science fit. I think there is a larger section of my family which by then, this is 2008, so by then I think the tech boom has happened in India. So there's enough exposure that a lot of Indian folks are moved to the West, particularly to the Silicon Valley. So there's enough exposure of computer science, big thing, and then people get
Yeah.
a really good life over there. I don't think startup culture was a established thing over here by then. I think it was more of a brain drain, a pure one-way brain drain that was happening, even from tech perspective, from India to the
Yeah.
West. So I think it was just that particular motivation with which my parents were guiding me. And I think probably growing up in Coimbatore, I also never had the exposure to figure out what my interests are and how do I even figure that out.
Right.
That's what happened. But you see, sometimes these inner passions are always telling you certain stories. So I was a state topper in history in my 12th grade. And I just didn't know, I mean, like, why I was a state topper. Meaning, I didn't put a lot of effort. I mean, like, it's just that I just love the subject. I mean, like, it's always a case of I looked at it from, okay, what really happened to this place? What really happened to this particular civilization?
Mm-hmm.
What really happened to this particular region of the world? Why they are speaking in this particular? These are extremely common, curious questions that always existed, and maybe somewhere intuitively, those particular questions would naturally pull me into subject of history, and with no effort, I would probably do that particular subject, say compared to chemistry or certain other subjects where one can be good, but it's not that
Right.
you're naturally instinctively keep putting all your 24-hour sessions are putting your effort into that. So there's always that, meaning the interest in history, which I think is what probably at the Vellore Institute, it being a very big university and bringing people from all over India, suddenly
Yeah.
exposes you to, because your it's just not just the teachers. I mean, like, of course, teachers play a very, I mean, like, I would say they play a role. They do play a small role, but most of your interactions are happening with students who are extremely smart.
Right.
And these extremely smart students have varied interests. They would have interest in debating. They would have interest in fashion, for example, and all these things. Grow. I mean, like, you've grown up in the second tier town, which have no exposure to all these things, and suddenly go and say, okay, life has all these components.
Right.
Abhi kya hai, and I also see. I think computer science was good. It was fun, meaning it's just logic, application of logic and stuff. But then I had a lot of other time as well to dilly dally on these many subjects.
Right.
So somehow these lunch table conversations with folks who had interest in these things, then I figured, okay, like, it's just not me. There are so many people who do have many of these interests, and of
Right.
course they end up doing engineering because that's what they're also probably led into. But then now that they come here, they have these options. They could explore many of these things. So I think I started doing debating by then, and then you don't have the mentorship here, right? Meaning it has a format, right? I mean, like, not just in the way that you narrate a story in terms of what words you use, how the research happens. These are all a systematic way of there are best practices in way of how one does. But I probably started in a very wild way. Okay, I mean, like, I've read a bunch of these things. I'm just going to connect back. But I think at VIT before, because I was interacting with the kids who are interested in all these things, so I probably who grew up in, say, bigger cities like Delhi and Bombay, you suddenly get exposed to these good books which talks about these things. For example, you start taking Discovery of India by Nehru, for example, or Glimpse of World History by Nehru again, or Will Durant's work on Western way of how they looked at world history and things like that. Suddenly you say, okay, look, I think these are best proponents of these subjects, and this is how they
Right.
look. And there is a sense through which, meaning a framework and a liberative way of how they're looking at humanity. And suddenly, somewhere when you read all these literature and so not literature, like these history books and the kind of people they refer. For example, irrelevantly, you would come across great folks like Marco Polo. When 13th and 14th century get discussed, you would get exposed to Wordsmith. You would get exposed to a lot of Renaissance thinkers. because it's part of that particular history, right? And suddenly you say, like, so why are these guys talking this particular thing? Again, you go and look at the political culture. It always looks like this. There is liberal aspects, there is conservative aspects. People are
Right.
fighting for the individual liberty in different regions, right? And all these regions are revolting. All these regions are fighting. All these regions are speaking about inclusiveness. There are certain other in different cultures there are atrocities that also happen, and you would see that, okay, look, the human story is the same everywhere. I mean, like, the expression gets in some sense repeated again and again and again, and suddenly you start losing your identities, right? I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay, I come from Tamil Nadu, I come from India, and I come from this particular thing. You suddenly lose the identity, and you say, okay, look, I think this is a really big way of how you could look at things. So it literally, the transformation into many of these subjects started over there. But I never knew, like, what do I do with it? I mean, okay, I mean, like, made a
Mm-hmm.
interest. I mean, like, TK, I mean, like, I've taken up certain good books, and it's exposing me to these really great authors. But then question is that, somewhere I was thinking, should I become one of those people? I'm like, so how their life was? Like, what was Nehru doing in some sense? What was,
Yeah.
say, someone like a traveler, a writer, like Huon Song from China, who was coming to Nalanda University in 7th century, learning Sanskrit. So these thinkers and writers naturally fascinate you. I mean, you would often relate to those global identities, which is fundamentally rooted in humanity in some sense, right? Or rather,
Right.
human experiences in some sense. And naturally, it intrigued me in terms of, okay, I just want to go a bit deeper. I mean, like, don't have any practice. I haven't interacted with academicians on these fields.
Mm-hmm.
But I never knew how to pursue this. And I finished my bachelor's. I ended up working as a coder for a couple of years in Chennai. But
Mm-hmm.
after, often my conscience would be pricked in terms of TK. I mean, like, look, and you can see it in the metro cities. I mean, like, I used to stay in the coastal. I mean, like, I used to stay in coastal Chennai
Mm-hmm.
in a very expensive home, and I got to take a route to my company, which is again, it's a high-rise park, 2 kilometers away. But I had to go through, very closely knitted slums, and you could clearly see how the disparities in some sense, right? I mean, like,
Right.
why it is
Right.
so unjust. I mean, like, why certain things are, and the way that we experience life is extremely skewed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I think somewhere, the thought of how do I connect back these dots were always there. And I know that, okay, there is a skill set. I mean, like, I love coding, not that I hate my time coding or doing engineering stuff. So I know
Mm-hmm.
that, okay, this is it's always going to be there. But I was just lucky. My parents, by then, they got far more comfortable with me. Okay, look, I think you can manage your life, and you'll figure out, and just TK. I mean, like, just do what you wanted to do. So I had the thoughts, and I was pretty much not convinced about doing a master's in computer science, for example.
Right.
I was just thinking, okay, should I just do a management? Yeah, it's interesting, but again, going and reading about the companies and how to build generation, of course, fascinated me, but it still is not my core interest of the fascination about the cultures and the lives of people around. So I really wanted to do that. And luckily, I stumbled upon this program called Young India Fellowship Program,
Okay.
which the newly built Ashoka University was hosting, and someone gave me that link, and I read that, and it just had the descriptions like, oh, professors from subjects as varied as psychology to philosophy to sociology would be pouring in, and you're going to have an immersive 1 year experience there. They're going to teach you writing. The subjects would make you reflect on various aspects of life. And what uh, particularly interested me was many of the authors that I got exposed to were part of the academic what do you call experience in Ashoka University, meaning all the authors based out of Stanford or Harvard or Europe, they were all coming into that particular program. They were doing this one month course, and they go back. For example, there was a course on international affairs, but all you would do is explore India's foreign policy from 1947 to this particular time. And it's done by someone called Rudra Chaudhary, who was one of foremost Indian strategic war thinker. So I was just, extremely intrigued by it. For sure, I really wanted to get into that program. So I got into the process, wrote these essays and stuff. By then, I think I wouldn't say my writing was good. I think it was extremely rough, I would say. I mean, like grammar was okay, but then I don't think I write it in a more convincing manner. But I think the enough varied things that I've done was okay to convince people that, okay, I mean, like I'm suited for the program too. Got for sure, luck also played its role. And I got into the program, and that actually changed my life in some sense, meaning I understood the difference of what a really good immersive academic experience could be. In some sense, the highs of, I know people talk about orgasms, but the intellectual orgasms of sitting in those classrooms with the sharpest minds on these subjects, what it could do to you, right? Because what usually comes out of is the values and the spirit, which is not measurable in some sense, right? I mean, which is what comes out of these classes. And that's what I felt. I mean, like throughout that particular 1 year, where I was thinking through, I think this is 2014 to 15. And I was thinking, okay, first I had to also think, okay, I mean, like, how do I connect back the dots? I never had the answer. But then the entire stress of the particular program is don't get fret about connecting back the dots. You will connect back the dots. But what is important is gathering these data points and continuing to ask these questions to yourself on what you want out of life, which is also learning by itself. Who's going to teach you how do you pursue these passions and be okay with it, right? I mean, because there is finance aspects, there is, as it goes with most of the Indian families, the Lokya Soshinga kind of a concept. I mean, like the kid is not probably working. Why is he leaving the job? What is he going to do? I mean, like what he's going to earn. I think all those questions come in, but then when you are with 200 people who are also experimenting with you and who are also talking the same language, who know that these are smartest people or some of the smartest people that you're meeting in the country, meaning there are doctors in the program, there are folks who have background in political science bachelors, there are folks who have bachelors in environmental science, the folks who are painters, such varied folks who come to that program, and of course there are engineers, and then all I would want to do is that not just do engineering thing, but then take up some of these identities of how these people think on the same problem. I mean, same problem statement is viewed in a very different way. So I think somewhere over there I started appreciating that particular viewpoint, that not necessary that you have the, I mean, like you can have a viewpoint, but doesn't mean that that is how it should be thought through. I mean, like there is an equal appreciation for the viewpoints of other experts from the subjects as well. So that appreciation I did develop there. And here is where the connecting of dots happened, right? I mean, like I clearly knew that, okay, code. So one of the things that I started doing is that, okay, as I explore these things and I probably work on writing, I could start using my coding skills on something. And luckily, one Belgian professor called Gilles and a computer science professor called Sudhindra Hangal, they want to set up the data analytics center, and which looks at how different political parties are strategizing for elections in terms of what party candidates they take in, how they are distributed, and what's their winning combination, why they do that. I mean, like, as you know, like India is an extremely diverse country, not only through religion, but through caste angles, through regional angles, and representation of all these communities make it a far more kind of a conversational management of this complex country in some sense, right? And certain parties approach it in an inclusive manner. A lot of parties indeed uses that particular to divide the people. And you can see the reflections of not only the ideology which dictates it, but also the kind of candidates they choose for meeting these ends. I mean, like for example,
Right.
the mainstream parties of Indian National Congress and Bharatiya Janata Party, like they all have their own
Mm-hmm.
ways of how they function. Same is the case with regional parties like Dravida Munnetra Kalakam, which has its own way of how they would approach it in, say, Tamil Nadu, and how that consciousness comes into the national scene. So it was just fascinating for me because Vaham, it's just an application of the domain of, or rather, in my sense, the connecting of dots happen like this, right? I'm
Right,
getting to
right.
understand a subject of political science. It's also one of my interests. At the same time, I'm trying to apply my data analytics skills, which is crawling of these data from Indian National Election Commission's websites, and different party websites, visiting these party websites, getting the real data of the caste details and social background details of these candidates, cleaning it, and then working with a statistician to apply regression analysis to come to a causal relation of how the parties are function, and then writing conclusive stories on this. So that is
Right.
the entire motto of that particular center. And that's where I ended up staying another year after my fellowship, also with the professors.
Nice.
And we ended up raising fund for that particular initiative, close to $5 million. And
Okay.
both the professors hired me and another student to naturally set up those early foundations of it. And it was a great experience for me, traveling, crisscrossing across the country, visiting these states. In some sense, think about it, right? I mean, like, particularly when you're south of Vindhyas, and particularly Tamil Nadu, which could be extremely, when I say isolating, it's a country of its own, right?
Yeah.
It could, I mean, like, you need not speak Hindi. I mean, like, it would behave. They have a lot of pride in their language. They are,
Mm-hmm.
as they could be as rude, like how French could be to other Europeans. So they think so highly of them. When I say so highly of them, like, both rightful and wrongful manners, right?
Yes, yes, right.
Which means that you're, of course, having a superficial understanding of what's happening in the north. And same is the case with North Indians as well. They don't understand these regional dynamics, that these regions have their own history. These regions have their own, at different points in time, they looked at this region in a different manner. They were interacting with the world in a different manner. And of course, we become this one single unit administration in 1947, but then they don't function like that in reality. I mean, like, because the consciousness through which we get declared are very different. So for me, coming and crisscrossing these through languages made me appreciate how complex and wonderful India is in some sense,
Right.
and how difficult it is to administer, how difficult it is to move things here. Indeed, I started appreciating a lot of gray sides of our politicians as well, meaning I understood why they're compromising on certain things, why they were not able to move faster, why, even though they are corrupt, what is it? Is it not the case that they don't have utilitarian goals also in mind? It's just not a black and white of, I'm going to earn money, so I'm just coming over here, I'm doing it. I think somewhere it's a mixture of both. I mean, like, they have certain social commitment to the people they represent. At the same time, the only way that things work, until we put systems in place, or rather robust institutions in place, which is a process, you're going to have a mixture of a gray shaded politicians in terms of how they work. Not being an apologist, what I'm saying is I was able to appreciate how complex it is to run things. It's not pure guys of Gandhis who can, meaning it's great that if we can have Gandhis everywhere, but I don't think we can create Gandhis at every single point in time. I think we are going to have these great characters who are going to run things. And I can't be judgmental about, through my values of, they should be extremely clean, and how they're going to function and things like that. So as that happened, I realized that why don't we just go and study this phenomenon of how different countries handle this change of development in during their times. For example, US went through the same process, meaning if you look at 18th century, of course they got independence, but the migration that happened from Europe largely into the American continent, and then the aspect of slavery and the aspect of how they went about creating these institutions, how they abolished slavery, from there in the building process of their own country. And they were extremely isolated until the World War One. And indeed, World War Two is when actually they come out and they say that, okay, we have arrived. So India, in some sense, having got drained of its wealth in the 200 years that British had come here, and had to rebuild it in its own way. It is not an overnight process. It's going to take 50, 60 years or 70 odd years to set the fundamentals right? I mean, like, you got to become a knowledge society. You have to become innovation. You have to have a sense of openness and inclusiveness through which you create that environment in the country. And then naturally, the moment of that is going to make this place a far better place. So I just want to do that. And that's what made me to just go to do law and diplomacy at the Fletcher School, Tufts University. And over there, I think I had two options. Either can I do the master's and do PhD, become a political science professor? That's one direction. The second direction is somewhere over there, I got really interested in the startups and the wealth generations aspect of it. And constantly I was testing out what these two directions are going to give me, because that's how you figure out what direction one can go. And I was going through this dilemma of, okay, that direction or the other direction. One day I would get convinced about, okay, go and becoming a political academician. The other day I would say, man, no, I don't think, okay, so that's your passion. But still, I think go do this, and then continue to connect back on these interests from there. Because financial constraints are also one of the factors that I got to continue to think through. I mean, like, you got a loan for 1 crore. I mean, like, how are we going to do it for if you plainly go into the PhD without figuring what the financial terms are going to work out. So I think these two things finally dictated, and somewhere in the middle of it, I got convinced that I'm going to go to the startup route. And that's how that direction happened, meaning I started interning at a company called Squad, which is based out of San Francisco. Then I started interning at Boeing. And then post my grad school, I worked for a company called Matrix Solutions. Eventually, I came back to India. But my other interest, which is critical writing and things like that, I continue to do it. I mean, like, I took subjects which are very writing intensive. Indeed, it just exposed me to a far more specific expert who teaches these certain subjects, which then made me to write. For example, I took a subject on Islamic history. I took a subject on Chinese foreign policy in ancient era. And what it does is that, I mean, like, it just gives me a fascinating outlook into how these societies, or at least the first look into how these societies work. And I think it still informs me. The many of the things that I gathered in my master's, the people that I interacted. Imagine you having a class where, like how it was in Delhi, where suddenly you have people from all over different parts of the country, and you're losing a sense of an identity from the region that you come from. At Fletcher, you're losing even more of your national identity in some sense, right? Now you again go back and see, okay, how Japanese are thinking about this, and how Koreans are thinking about this, how Chinese are thinking about this. Then you know that, okay, I mean, like, there's no one country is right over here. I mean, like, everyone has some right, and everyone has some selfish needs, or rather interests. And they're all debating again, like how inside India we are debating across different states. I think it's the same thing that's happening over there. They all have hopes. They all were fighting for their livelihood. They all have their own problems, and they're continuously interacting with and then debating all these things. Some folks could be aggressive in certain things, and you might not by value agree with them, and that's okay. But then it's always a complex picture, and it's not, oh, one country is right kind of a picture. And it was great to do that, because you sit with Americans and Europeans and then South Asians and East Asians debating on things, and of course Africans who are other main stakeholders, debating on the same issues of climate change to how UN got to be organized, and the different other global problems that we are facing as countries, including the corruption in developing countries. You just get a far more systemic exposure on, okay, this is not just a problem that's unique to India. All other countries also face their own different problems. and what is the learning that you start gathering from these things, which is what the happened in these places. Indeed, I would say that when you go to Canada, that's the same experience that might happen to you. I mean, like when you go there, predominantly, I think a lot of Indian thinking would have dictated, or rather, even the Middle East influence in terms of how you would have looked at life would have influenced you so
Yes.
far. But then suddenly you sitting over there and seeing things not only make you see from their perspective, but suddenly you will not take sides for each of these things. I mean, like you'll just become
Yeah.
TK. All these guys have sides. What is a more compassionate way of how we sympathize on these different regions? That's how I think you'll start thinking. So I think that's what happened, frankly. And I think at some point I decided, okay, I'm going to come back. Doesn't mean that it's based out of patriotism in some sense, but frankly, I think I derived energy out of this place. I, of course, derived energy out of the many say they derived energy and like a lot of learning and mentorship and experience in the US as well. So these things will stay, and these things are always my connective links, which would inform my thoughts in some sense in terms of how I continue to look at life. So that's broadly in terms of the story of how it all worked. And I think my first point on the energy that I find here when I came back, the rise of tier 2 cities, indeed the conversation that I'm having with a very curious 20-year-old guy who is of course going out, but then he's extremely interested in knowing the lives of others. I think these are all extremely positive change that has happened in this place. So I'm as much excited that way, to interact with you, Abdur.
Nice. Yeah, it was quite a lot of information, and yeah, you actually gave me the whole timeline of the entire thing, from when you started in bachelor's, and then how it all transformed, the financial aspects of it, and then how your viewpoint became more diversified as you went abroad, and then started interacting with more and more people. Yeah, I really agree with that. All of the people that I've asked or talked to so far, one of the things that they say happens when you meet a lot of people from different backgrounds is that's the main point. They say that you'll start to think from their perspective also. So being in just one place, you'll always have this bias towards the way people in your place think, and then when you move to other places, you'll get a much more diversified viewpoint. So that is one of the things that they say it's the most important.
That's right. And as the saying goes, not the saying, but travel changes people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because somewhere I think what travel does is it lets you take up certain entities from all these places. I mean, like you go to Bali or Jordan or to Nairobi. I'm sure you're going to fall in love with certain aspects of those people, and you can't say that no, that's not part of me anymore. I'm sure it becomes part of it. So I think more one travels, I'm sure they bound to become extremely open to new thoughts and new ideas.
Right. Also, I was curious, how you got into the product side of things, product development and things from again from law. So was that kind of due to the financial pressure, or you started exploring that out of interest?
Right. So it's again going back to the connecting the dots part, right? Look at the thought process here, right? I mean, okay, got the coding skills, you understand what's happening in the tech world, and suddenly you're getting exposed to two things. One is you become good with critical writing. You kind of improve on the aspect of communication with people from different cultures, and suddenly the third element is you're getting exposed into strategy and innovation, which I think I missed earlier. I mean, Fletcher School had a partnership with Harvard Business School. They were partner schools, and those kids can spend a quarter of their entire year. I mean, entire masters in our school, and we could do that. Boston is really connected that way. There's a lot of exchange between MIT and Harvard and schools like Fletcher, and that gave me an option to get exposed to not only finance and strategy, but I was just connecting into, okay, how tech innovation happens. And most of
Right.
these places, what you do is do a lot of case studies in terms of how these companies strategized, and what factors were letting them do it. And what I know, or rather, when sitting in those classes, two things helped. Actually, being an engineer, you always see it in a logical manner, right? And when you read philosophy, it's also extremely logic. It's A tends to B tends to C, and hence A tends to C. I mean, like it's
Yeah.
just purely coding is also works like that, right? So
Yeah.
it's not a very meaning for someone who is used to thinking logically, arguing logically. Writing also ends up becoming the same thing. Meaning, indeed, if you are extremely logical, you're writing extremely sharply, in some sense, right?
Right.
To me, when I sat in those classes, that logical thing naturally came into place. I mean, okay, like, look, I think there is a A factor, B factor, C factor, which is letting them to take these decisions. But then, what really helped is that having these liberal arts background is making me sympathize with different stakeholders who are involved in these A, B, C variables. Meaning, what
Right.
sales team are thinking, what tech team was thinking, what say the marketing team, or the product team would have to think. In some sense, you can start sympathizing with these players at a human level. That
Yeah.
there is a pressure. And see, it's not a people don't choose things rationally, and literature teaches you so much, right? I mean, like, there is, if you look at realistic manner, there is a combination of rational plus emotional element that always goes into decision making. There is, if you apply only the rational variables, and look, rationally, this is what should have happened. I don't think that happens. Even in economics, that doesn't happen. That's why behavioral economics is a very interesting subject, because people behave differently, and they
Right.
don't just respond to demand and supply, which is the more rational way of how things should have been. So for me, I know that, okay, I'm going to be like, compared to a normal MBA kid, who probably doesn't have exposure on these different subjects.
Right.
I know that, I could see all these lenses in different way, or rather, at least I carry these elements from me, which is much more unique, and could compete, in my opinion, much more even better than what that particular proportion is, which is a pure MBA or engineering, or what are the background through which they come from. It's just that
Right.
probably society doesn't look that way. But then that you can see that, for example, you design things, more you understand psychology of the user. Your design would be far more different. It's not just a functional goal that they're attaining, but then there's a lot of emotional goals that goes through in terms of interacting with the product. So I think liberal arts naturally gives that advantage. And luckily, I did computer science in my bachelor. So
Bachelor's
suddenly,
also.
I was well suited to go and be that anchor connector role, who can speak all these different languages with these different people. So I was thinking, okay, I mean, like, now what role that I could even look at? I mean, like, TK, I mean, like, all these things you have, what role would you suit? So one thing that I figured out is that, okay, strategy and consulting, which is, pure strategy, is more like, the McKinseys and BCGs and all these people. What they do is they go to a company, they take up a problem of theirs, they just go analyzing them step by step, both from their financial point of view, their organizational point of view, their process point of view, and they start telling, okay, these changes you got to do to achieve these goals. That's what most of these consultants do. And I know that that's one direction to explore. The other direction is that, okay, I got a tech background, I can speak that particular language. I know the strategy thing, because naturally, it's just pure common sense way of how you do it. And finally, you can communicate, negotiate, and understand where people come from, because of your exposure to literature and history in some sense. So I said, TK, I mean, like, you're going to be good in this. And now the world will take a bit more time for them to convince. But I know that you're going to do well into this. And I experimented, used my internships to validate that. And of course, naturally, when you taste 2 or 3 successes, then you understand, okay, I mean, like, you're good at it. Fit, I think one step leads to another step, right? I think you start making the connections, and you become very clearer on the role. Then I started applying, okay, this is the kind of startup that I would want to look at, and let's start applying, and naturally one thing led to the other before I ended up Matrix Solutions on a product role in some sense.
Nice. Yeah. That actually makes sense. Having all of this different kind of experiences allows you to, just the way you told, speak different languages, and so kind of like, be the person connecting all of these people.
Correct.
So yeah, that's
Because
nice.
at the end of the day, people are trying to find those connection with these individuals who can speak their language. For example, if you just end up making a sales guy and a tech guy sit in a table and expect them to understand each other. When I say they speak different languages, I think their priorities are first different.
Right.
And not necessarily that you would have the domain knowledge of each of these streams, meaning they understanding what tech debt is, they understanding why certain things which might on paper look logical, but it's a far more complex thing to achieve because there is a library constraint, or you have certain backend constraint and things like that. Same as the case with sales. I mean, like, why sales could be so hard, and oftentimes you got to compromise, and there is no way that you got to continue dealing with a perfect solution to move forward, or even an uncompromised solution to move forward. You always got to compromise moving forward. So a good product guy then ends up speaking the same language to both these people. I mean, like, he can, of course, communicate that in the language that the tech guy understands. But because he runs the business, he also could, on equal terms, tell sales, of course, if you're going to do that in a convincing manner, you can tell him that this is what is going to happen. You still want to go ahead with this thing. And I think it becomes easier to then convince both these stakeholders, right? Oftentimes, both these people will not be happy with you, but you will also ensure that they are not extremely unhappy in terms of how they were communicated and given what they really wanted to do.
Yeah. Nice. Sense. So that was quite a lot. Also, actually, like initially yesterday at night, I mean, I was actually just, sitting and maybe thinking, okay, what are things I should be, asking you? You actually, cleared everything. You gave the entire timeline. So instead, let me ask you, if there's anything you want to know about me.
Of course. Yeah. No, meaning, of course, Abdur. I mean, like, I'm really fascinated, particularly for your, new life, new experience that you're going to have. How do you look at it? And I'm sure, I think this particular viewpoint is going to continue changing, right? How do you look at this new move? Are you going with an open mind? Are you are you more of an at this point in time more tech centric in terms of how you look at the world? What are the different things that you think you're going to do in Canada in some sense?
Okay, so yes, this is something that even I consistently question myself, that what am I going to do, and a lot of times the answer is that I don't know. It's just that things are so I mean, I'm so new to all of this that kind of feels like I haven't yet figured it out, and I kind of try to research about it, and that's what everyone says, that it's like right now what I'm trying to do is just keeping an open mind. So right now, like, I'm going for an applied computing course, so we hardly have like 4 subjects to take, I mean 4 courses to take. So after that, maybe I'll work in the tech domain for a few years, and then after that, I kind of feel that I'm not going to stay in tech for very long, maybe like the next 3-4 years, and after that I'll probably move to maybe something like entrepreneurship or something else. And even in the tech side, if you think about it, there isn't, it's like it isn't just like a single domain. There are so many things. I mean, when I was in college, then I mean, okay, like, let me tell you my like story from the very beginning. So when I was in school, I didn't know anything about computers, I mean, like how computers work and all, because we don't have such uh, courses, I mean, not courses, I would say, but subjects at that time. Instead, what I knew was only about electronics and things. So at that time, I thought that, okay, tech means electronics. I mean, anything you want to build, for example, a laptop, it's made out of all of these electronic components. So only if you know this, you'll be able to make something like a laptop or a phone. So I kind of went a bit into electronics. And then, yeah, I think when I was, in the high school and in my 9th, 10th high school times, and at that time, I started like getting some interest into robotics. So at that time, not robotics, actually more into drones and these flying objects, toys and things. So I started, doing some research on them, because at that time, we literally had so much of free time. There wasn't anything else to do. We didn't have any pressure on us, to earn or anything. So I used to spend most of my time. I didn't even study at that time. I used to just spend all of my time, doing research on these things. So that was what fascinated me. Then I moved to college, and at that time I thought, okay, now I won't be able to do anything with the skill. So instead, I found this robotics club that I thought, is really cool. And, they had all these 3D printers and walking robots, and I don't know what else. So I, kind of joined that, and then I was a part of that club for like until I left the college. So until then, I was doing most of my work related to robotics. So that was my interest. And then after that, once I got out of the club, I mean, in between itself, the pandemic started. So I came back to my home place. And after that, I didn't do anything in robotics. Instead, I started, learning a bit about things like web development and the coding side. I mean, I was never really a coder in my school days, or even in the beginning of my college. So that is when I started, actually in just the last year of my college. I started learning web development. And then, because I knew that, if I have to get a job, it has to be in web dev. There isn't any other thing that I can get, straight out of from a college. So that's where I started learning web dev, and got a job. And before that, actually, I forgot to mention, while I was learning robotics, I did it for like 1 or 2 years. And then after that, I had a chance to uh, get some internships in like a lot of places. So the first internship was after my second year at IIT Madras. It was in AI. So that was like, in the very beginning, when I was just learning, exploring that field. And then after that, I did an internship at a Singapore-based startup. So it is actually co-founded by one of the alumni from my college, and he was also like a part of the same robotics club that I was a part of. So that's where he got to know me, and he kind of hired me. So I got to explore some AI stuff also, and then after that, I got an internship at TU Munich, which was like fully funded by this German uh, fellowship program, I think, scholarship program, which goes by the name DARD. It's I mean the DAAD. So there is some expansion for it, which is in German. So I don't really know how to pronounce it, but yeah. So there's
Right.
this DARD Y scholarship. So
Right.
yeah, so all of this happened, and I thought that like AI is the next big thing, and that's where I'll be headed. But that didn't work out again. I ended up being in web dev, and here I am. So it's like, at the time when I was in robotics, and if somebody had asked me, what do you want to do in the future, I would have just told robotics. And even if they would have said, no, I think you'll go into web dev, because that's what everyone's doing, I would have told, no, you're just an idiot. Seriously, no, it's not going to be like that. It's like
Right.
at every stage of my like career, I picked up something, and I thought I'm going to stick with it for the rest of my life, but it never works out that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just realized that, yeah, I change, many other people change. So I'm just keeping an open mind right now. And what I'm thinking is, like whatever courses I get, and after courses, actually in the program that I'm going, so I just have to study for 8 months, and then in the next 8 months, I have to do a paid internship. So the program spans for a total of 16 months. Half of that is the study period, 4 courses, and then the next 2 terms, which is 8 months, I'll have to work as a full-time intern. So I'm not really sure what kind of opportunity I'm going to get there again. So
Right.
what I think is, again, there might be an opportunity to change my career, and maybe try out something new. So yeah, so that was what I was telling was that I'm just keeping an open mind right now. I'm not really, thinking that, I'm going to go in this specific direction only. So that's what, like, whatever opportunities life throws my way, I'm just gonna take it. And if it's fun, then yeah, let's like sit through it. So that's like in a nutshell what what plans I have for now. I really
Yeah.
don't have long-term plans as such.
No, that's how it is. I think um, there are these new changes that happen in the last 20, 30 odd years, which is
Mhm.
one thing is pretty clear that none of us are going to have one career, right? It's going to be a series of careers, series of probably contrasting to different careers that you're going to, not like, our parents' time, they join one company that stayed for like 30 or 35 odd years, they
Yeah, yeah,
retire and then move on. I mean, like, nothing wrong with that, but the world has changed. And the kind of things one could try and experience in life also has naturally expanded, which then means that naturally people are going to have these different careers, right? They could start as a dev, they could become a fiction writer for all one
wow,
knows, and they could end up becoming a traveler, influencer on the other on another day, and then they could retire as an environmentalist
right.
and an academician in their last life. So it could be, and but then if you see, my understanding is that all the things that you're doing, it will always get connected. Okay.
Right.
I mean, I still believe that the people that I met in my 10th grade kind of rekindled my interest in history. The coincident computer science bachelor's has made me become product
Right.
person. The in some sense, the exposure in Delhi is going to dictate on the places that I would want to settle down, right? So in some sense, it's all connected.
Right.
We might think that, oh, it's all happening randomly. I mean, like how one has this connection over the other, but but unfortunately, not unfortunately, fortunately, I think this is how it works. So that's why that the Stanford speech that Steve Jobs tells, where he gives a speech on how he was thrown out of Apple, then he go on to find Pixar, and the calligraphy that he learned, which ended up becoming one of the skill sets that he would apply in Pixar in terms of the characters that they would explore over there, and then how the design sense would continue to uh, come and make the choices in how Apple products would uh, apply as a design principles. Now, all these are extremely connected, meaning his
Mhm.
childhood calligraphy class that he randomly took
Right.
is in some senses connected him into why design could be this. So I believe that's how things work, and more one continues to do this reflection, as Confucius would point out. I mean, like he would often say, what's more important is don't continue traveling in the stream, just get out. Oftentimes just start seeing how the stream is going, where it is going, and what you really
Yeah.
wanted to do. Once you reflect that, and once your priorities become nicer, then you will always are extremely aware of how you're making these choices and how you're connecting these choices.
Right.
Not the choices are made for you, right? So I think that's how it should be done, and not panicking because something is not working out for us,
Yeah.
right? Be it
Right.
the relationship, be the work, be the work life, be it anything that's happening in things around. I think that's one of the best ways to respond
Right.
in some sense.
So also another thing I forgot to mention was I don't know, like, so I still have this interest of mine of like this fascination with drones and things, things that fly in the air in general. So I
Right.
still have that fascination. So what I was thinking, probably, I don't know, maybe after 5 years, 10 years, when I'm a bit stable, then I'll probably like start doing it as a hobby. Because I
Yeah.
mean, when I was back there in India in school, then I didn't have the resources to get my hands on the parts that I could use to build something like that. Even when I was in Saudi, there isn't this culture of doing things like DIY. Usually, because people
Yeah.
in these
Yeah, I
Middle
own
Eastern
one, and I
countries.
often, yes, I think it's just fascinating. I mean, like,
Mm.
I go with my papa and go into the rural outskirts of Coimbatore often when I go back, and we just do this as a hobby, like how fishing as a hobby.
Yeah,
I teach him these drone maneuvers, and then he also gets really excited about it, and then he does those maneuvers over there, and then it goes around whizzing past your ears,
yeah,
and I think it's a lot of
nice.
fun activity that way. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I'll let you finish your thought.
Yeah, so I was just saying that back when I was in Middle East at that time, so I it's like again there also it was not very easy to get my hands on the parts that I would need to, and another thing, like, sorry, so this drones thing that I'm talking about, it's not like the pre-assembled ones. I'm talking about the ones that you make yourselves, the DIY type. So
Right.
there is no DIY culture in the Middle East. So people there are just like extremely rich. All they do is they just buy whatever's available. They don't
Right.
sit and make things. They'll either play
Yeah.
games or they'll smoke, or they'll just buy things. So that's all they
Yep.
do.
Yep.
So again, like when I was in childhood in India, then in Bihar there is no such thing as these DIY shops, hobby shops and things. Then same thing in Saudi. And then after that, when I went to college, then I realized that yeah, like India had moved ahead since during the time when I was there in Saudi, because Amazon stores opened up, and then these things started becoming more and more available. But then there was no time, because there was no time like for me to build these things, because when I was in school I had like a lot of time. But when I
Yep.
went to college, things became busy. I had to maintain my grades, because I kind of had this
Yep.
plan to do a master's degree, so I had to keep my grades up. So these were the things. But yeah, so what I was thinking is probably like maybe after 5 years, 10 years, or maybe earlier than that, who knows, if I I might start picking up that hobby again, and
Yeah.
start
Yeah. Who
making
knows?
drones.
So you'll be probably interning at an air transportation startup,
Yeah,
and
who knows exactly.
probably yes. I think. I mean, like you're seeing the prototypes already, right? I think
Mm.
certain US companies are trying it out in New York and SF. And there
Right.
are actually Chinese who have caught up and indeed have much better models in terms of moving passengers on drones. I mean, the bigger autonomous missions from one place to another place. And I think that's the future of mobility in some sense. You're going to have air controllers regulating this entire movement and
Mm.
how people are going to do it. And so these are all new avenues
Right.
that's opening up. We are in that crux of that particular change, and oftentimes, your college interest would tell something at the choices that you're
Yeah.
going to make at 30. Uh, Probably by then you'll be considering your entrepreneurial startup, and then you're connecting back to your passion, and then finance in some sense, and then you're ending up doing something like that. So that's pretty cool, Abdur.
Yeah.
Continue, doing all these things on the side. Never
Yep.
ever worry that these hobbies are actually waste of time. It gives first a lot of pleasure,
Right.
and I'm often I often know that, okay, like when people figure out substantially what they want to do, many of these hobbies actually dictate you how you end up doing. Indeed, when it comes to the startups or things like that, those things will dictate how you solve problems. So
Right.
yeah.